Numbers 31:3. So Moses spoke to the people, saying, "Arm some of yourselves for the war, and let them go against the Midianites to take vengeance for the Lord of Midian." In verses 13 to 15. And Moses, Eleazar the priest, and all the leaders of the congregation went to meet them outside the camp. But Moses was angry with the officers of the army, with the captains over thousands and the captains over hundreds who had come from the battle. And Moses said to them, "Have you kept all the women alive?"
Well, good morning, everyone. So it was pretty difficult selecting one verse for the drash for this portion, because throughout every chapter and section of this week's Torah portion, I detected one ongoing, consistent theme, and that was God's passion to protect. God's passion to protect. And this really struck me as God's motive, one of God's motives behind so many of the laws that he gives to Israel. His passion to protect them, their blessings, and protect their future. And so what I want to kind of do this morning is very briefly survey a number of the portions within the portion, just to help us see how passionate this God of Israel is for the protection of his people and their blessings. So our Torah portion begins in Numbers 30 on vows for men and women. And honestly, at my first reading of this text, I may or may not have gotten a bit upset because the text says that when a man made a vow, he was simply bound to it by his word. But if a woman made a vow, her husband or her father could nullify her vow. Well, so later, as I researched a little bit more, which we should always do, I saw that what the biblical writer, and in fact, I dare say what the divine author have in mind here, is the man's responsibility to protect the women of their household. And what they also actually have in mind is Genesis 3. The precedent behind this law on vows stems from the fact that back in Eden, Adam failed to protect his wife during the temptation. But, not only her, he failed to protect all of their God-given blessings, their dominion, and their entire future in Eden. And so, while of course both are guilty of disobedience, the formal culpability fell on Adam because of his silence and failure to protect Eve from the harmful serpent. He was created first, and he had this responsibility to protect. Perhaps that's why even in the New Testament, in the Brit Hadashah, Paul refers to original sin as Adam's transgression, even though Paul, the great rabbi, knew, and we all know, Eve's part. Okay, so next, in chapter 31, we see God giving Israel the command to carry out his divine and just wrath upon the Midianites, including the women and the children. Again, we might get upset and very much riled at such a text in the Bible. But what was God doing? Well, for this, he actually tells us very plainly. He was intent on protecting Israel's future in the land by uprooting the very threat and seeds of later apostasy by way of mixing with the Canaanite women, which God had already told Israel would lead to their forsaking of the Lord and compromising their blessings and their presence in the land. So many difficult texts in the Torah begin to make sense when we begin thinking in light of God's zeal to protect you, to protect your blessings and your future. So, unfortunately, Israel failed in this command and did mix with the Canaanite women throughout their history. We know this. And later biblical writers and prophets look back on this particular failure as the central cause of Israel's apostasy and exiles. And the psalmist really is the one who I think laments this the best, in just the best imagery. In Psalm 106, he says, "They did not destroy the peoples as the Lord had commanded them. But they mingled with the nations and adopted their customs. They worshipped their idols, which became a snare to them. They sacrificed their sons and their daughters to demons. They shed innocent blood, the blood of their sons and daughters, whom they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan, and the land was desecrated by their blood. Okay, next, we see God's passion to not only protect but distinguish between a murderer and the accidental manslayer by commanding Israel to build cities of refuge. God is passionate about protecting the blessing of justice in the land via the opportunity for a fair trial and multiple witnesses, and not simply taking matters into one's own hands by a blinding thirst for bloody revenge. No, one must not be executed without a trial, Torah says. So thank God for that, right? And thank God, I might add, for this country also, who adopted these same laws and principles in a constitution that no country had ever seen before. Amen? And what a light Israel has already proved to the nations, especially in this land of liberty and justice for all. Nevertheless, still pray for this country and Israel's return to its biblical roots. Finally, we finished the Torah portion and the book of Numbers. Yay! Who else is excited about that? I am. So we finished the Torah portion with God's passion to protect Israel's inheritance and tribal allotment. So with the situation of Zelophehad, or however you say his name, so with the situation of his daughters who inherited property and were told to marry within their own tribe, those were the laws given there, we see in these laws God protecting each tribe's inheritance, making sure that one tribe's allotted portion would not be taken by or absorbed into another tribe, okay? Each was to possess their own blessing, and God would not give away one's blessing to another. Not then, and not today. Amen. So, in conclusion, just as God was passionate about protecting Israel, her blessings, and her future, this same unchanging God of Israel is passionate about protecting you, your allotted blessings, and your future. If God be for us, who can be against us? If God is so passionate in the Torah for protecting Israel and her earthly blessings, think of how much more this same God has passionately fought to securing and protecting your soul, your eternal future, and your eternal blessings. Your treasures in heaven, which no one can take away from you, no moth can destroy, nor thieves break in and steal. In Jesus, in Yeshua, God has demonstrated his ultimate zeal for his ultimate protection of you, your blessing, and your future. At the same time, I wonder how many of you actually need to sit in that truth, to really, really take it in and maybe let it pass through the rigid checkpoints of your heart and your mind. I wonder how many of us resist the truth that God is really for you, that God is really for us, and that he is intent on blessing you and protecting those blessings. Well, I hope that by observing God's zeal in the Torah for such detailed laws that would protect his people and their blessings in their future, you too would come to open yourself up more to God's passionate goodness toward you, especially by getting to know the true God of Israel, who in fact secured your eternal protection with blood. He really does have your best in mind, and he won't let you settle for less. Usually what we think is best for us is far inferior to what he knows is best. Like C.S. Lewis said, we are so often like children settling for playing with mud pies in the slums because we cannot imagine what a holiday at the beach is like. We too often settle for this temporary world because we cannot imagine what God's everlasting kingdom is like. But God is really for you. He is intent on giving you only the very best of blessings, even when you don't understand, and even if it upsets you and riles you up a bit. So with that, I hope you take time this Shabbat to ponder what all this means for you and what it looks like for you. Shabbat Shalom.